Audio Unleashed.
You good to go?
I'm ready to go. Let's make it happen. Right. Let's make the magic.
We don't believe in magic, though.
When from an entertainment standpoint, I believe in magic.
There you go. Let's create a magical experience.
Yeah.
So what are we doing for that magical experience?
We are going to talk about audio products.
Yeah.
And audio technologies and people that write about audio and legal things having to do with audio.
Yeah.
And a potpourri, if you will, of audio stuff.
A cornucopia.
Something for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I want to start this week with this article that you sent me from Darko's website, darko.audio. There's also an accompanying YouTube video, as there usually is. The article is called Apple Music's High-Res Plumbing is Still Leaky. And the video is called High-Res Audio and Apple Music Done Right, brackets, and without an iPad. So I think that's going to be a fun one to talk about. You were a little bit surprised by all of this, I think. So
I was, because I don't review just the way my career has gone. For whatever reason, I don't review multi-room audio gear at this point. And so I was unaware of a lot of this. I do review sound bars that have this stuff built in, but I don't treat it as something important because with a sound bar, you care about performance of the sound bar with, movies, right?
Sure.
And maybe music, but the music you can get in there through any number of ways, like Bluetooth, whatever. So this is to me just like a feature. It's like I check it out. I'm like, hey, it has this feature. Great. Move on. But I learned a lot from this video. I didn't actually read the article. I just watched the video. I was like, oh, wow. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. He really dug in deep. He just did a fantastic job of this.
The article is kind of just a summary of the video. I mean, I like that. Yeah. I like that John does this because a lot of times when there is a video of his that I want to check out and I'm like, crap, I'm at the doctor's office or something. I just don't have time. I'll just go to his website and read the article instead. Yeah. So I like that he does both. But yeah, the article is just sort of a summary of the video.
Yeah. So next up, we have, there's an article I saw in Stereophile about how Martin Colloms, I was surprised that you'd never heard of him.
Never heard of him.
He's a big deal. He was one of the founders of Monitor Audio, but is better known as a journalist. And he's written for mostly British magazines, but he wrote for Stereophile back in the 90s. And that's when I read Stereophile with a great passion back when it was digest sized and it was really it just crackled with life, Yeah. And it's still a good magazine, but back then it was awesome. And I remember reading him back then. And so he's coming back but Jim Austin, the editor of Stereophile, wrote this, welcome back Martin kind of thing. And he cited this past column, which I remembered reading, all about the testing methodologies that they feel are appropriate for high-end audio. And I was just like, oh my God, I remember that. And we have come a long way since then. And I wanted to talk about like the methodologies they were recommending back then and what, now that we have so much more of a scientific and rational approach to audio, I think I wanted to kind of talk about the differences there and how the audio world has evolved since that column was written in 1991.
I have to admit, I'm ashamed that I didn't know his name because Monitor Audio is one of my favorite speaker brands. So
yeah, well, I guess he founded that and he got into journalism. He wrote a great book called High Performance Loudspeakers, which I think has been through, 5 or 6 or 7 editions, which I have read, and it is one of the better books on loudspeaker, how loudspeakers work. But it's interesting to compare this column with, which I don't know if he feels the same way now. I don't know if this column, I don't know, but we're going to dig into it. And then we have, I think we're talking about something else after that.
Yes, we are. So I found an article in Slash Gear that I have to admit, There's slight ulterior motives here. I feel like I'm throwing some chum into the water. The article is titled "Why Audiophiles Have Problems with Beats Headphones," and I saw this, and I was just like, I don't really have a whole lot to say about this. I just want to hear Brent talk about it.
Okay,
I threw to the idea board, and we're talking about it. So
I have so much history. I have so much history with Beats headphones, and a modest amount of insider information and insight. Since I watched this company literally from day one. I think you and I were both at the announcement when Beats was launched at the CEDIA show, and I've followed them since then. I've reviewed a lot of their products. I don't review headphones now, but I until recently I did. I've reviewed a ton of their products. I actually use one of their products now, and as you do. And but I wanted to kind of go through some of the history of that and talk about what they're saying. And talk about if this is still relevant now, because people still talk about Beats as like, oh, Beats is crap. In the same way they talk about Bose, oh, Bose is crap. But they're basing those statements on, I mean, so many guys are like, oh, no highs, no lows must be Bose. I'm like, yeah, that phrase was coined like 40 years ago to talk about products that have not existed for ages, that were designed by people that are all dead.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think Beats is getting to that point where people are like, oh, Beats sucks. Yeah. But Beats is not in any way the same company that it was back then. Not in any way except for the name.
That is correct. That is correct.
We're going to wrap up for our Patreon subscribers only special extra segment. We found, Dennis found, an absolutely fabulous article in strategy.com. That's strata-GEE.com. About the Sonos's recent loss in a suit against Google, a patent suit. And Ted Green, who does strategy and is an industry veteran, really digs deep into patent law and why Sonos lost this judgment. And it actually gave me a lot more insight into Sonos than I had before. Yeah. Sonos, the company, not the product, so to speak. But I was just like, really? They did that?
Yeah.
Ooh. That's not good. So Patreon subscribers only will get our in-depth discussion about patent law, and which I know a hair about because I've had some small involvement with that. But you know, it's a fascinating story, and we have to encourage everyone to go read this article because it's awesome. It's long. Yeah. It's awesome.
And I think we're going to put it in the Patreon segment because we don't want our Wirecutter overlords hearing what I have to say about how this has affected my multi-room speaker guide.
Oh, they're too cheap to pay for Patreon?
They are. No, they're not. They just, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
They're busy people.
Let's pretend I didn't say that and go to the Apple Music thing.
They're busy people. They don't have time to listen to all this crap.
So it's true. They
probably
do.
They would probably rather not know what we're saying here.
It would make their lives easier. Yes.
It would make, yes.
All right. Well, we'll get to that eventually for patrons, but let's talk about this Apple Music thing first. So how'd you stumble across this, and what made you put it in the idea board, man?
Well, I was on YouTube looking for videos about how to install mini splits, and because I was thinking about putting an extra one in, and someone told me, actually a service guy told me how easy they are to do. I'm like, oh, so I'll look. And of course, YouTube shoves all sorts of stuff at you. And I've watched a lot of John's videos. And so John Darko, and it had that one. And I was kind of like, oh, let me look at that. And I watched it, and I was, since I do kind of nip around the edges of this topic, but I don't have time to dig deep into it, right? But I thought, like, oh, let me see what John says about this. And plus I don't have Apple Music, and I don't really listen to high-res audio. But still, I was kind of like, I really should know what's going on here. And oh my God, I mean, he really digs in deep. And he also doesn't in any way rely on press releases or anything like that. So, that's rare for a audio journalist or a tech journalist in general. And he basically has actually tried all these different permutations out and tried to figure out like, what can you do to get high-res audio into, from Apple Music into your speakers, but it kind of digs into a lot of issues that are out there for, Wi-Fi based audio systems. Or streaming, any kind of streaming and high-res streaming. Right. And there was like the big shocker for me is I did not know that AirPlay 2, the Apple technology, only allows AAC. It does not allow uncompressed.
Does it? See, I'm still confused about that because I thought it would do uncompressed, but I thought it would only do it at 4816.
Well, he says it kicks everything down to AAC 256.
Okay.
Which is, like MP3. So, and he was hooking everything up to this MyTech Brooklyn DAC that conveniently has a front panel display that shows you exactly what it's getting, which I wish there was a lot more of that. I actually have something to say about this topic.
Okay.
You want to hear it?
Yeah, say it.
It really disappoints me that it's getting things like high-res audio and getting a certain amount of audio resolution from whatever digital source can be so dicey, is a simple way to put it, but it's so often hard to confirm what you're getting. Most of the devices tell you either nothing or only a little bit, so you don't really know. I mean, yeah, if you have this nice MyTech DAC, you do, but for the most part, you don't know what sample rate you're getting. You don't know. I mean, yeah, and DACs will have a little light that says 96K or something like that, but you really, it's still kind of mystery meat to me. And
there's a lot of that with Bluetooth too. I mean, I think Rotel is one of the few brands out there where on their hi-fi gear, if you're streaming Bluetooth, it'll say, Bluetooth AAC codec, and I'm like, ooh. So
wow.
It's like
when
they do. They've been dropping AAC and only doing aptX HD. So I will stream something from my iPhone and unfortunately see Bluetooth SBC, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, and so often you think you're getting, the phone or the Bluetooth speaker or the whatever are marketed as having these supposed improvements over SBC, like aptX and aptX lossless and LDAC and things like that. But it's in the vast majority of cases, it's difficult or impossible to know what you're really getting. And so that's why I don't worry too much about it, because even Bluetooth, maybe if you're listening on a really fancy system, a really good audio system, anybody can hear the difference between, standard like SBC Bluetooth and lossless audio. Okay. CD quality audio, right? Anybody can hear that. It's not a huge difference, but it's there. And, can you hear it on every tune? Probably not. Are you going to care? I don't know. But, if you listen to stuff like cymbals and stuff like that, you can, especially in the high frequencies, you can hear it. But it's not bad. And so my attitude towards, so many people get so worked up about all these different codecs and high-res audio and this and that, and they feel like they're audiophiles, and so they need to care about all this stuff because people have told them they need to care about all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I have to say, John Darko, despite being a high-end audio guy, is not like, oh my God, you have to go get high-res audio. It'll change your life. He's like, high-res. Yeah, I guess, whatever. Not a big deal. And he's also like, even when it comes to like different DACs, he's like, pretty much all fine nowadays.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of courage. And you
does.
and I are not really in high-end audio, so we can say stuff like that and our careers aren't going to end. But, for him to do that is really, all the high-end audio publications don't do that. They're like, gosh, everything matters and blah, blah, and you have to worry about all these things and blah, 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 blah.
There's a Facebook group called Everything Affects the Sound. The acronym is EATS. And they are notorious for swinging the band hammer left and right. If you in any way, shape, or form insinuate that there's anything in audio that is snake oil, right? There's another Facebook group that you and I belong to called Audio BS, right? And a sort of like a badge of courage for that group is people getting banned from Everything Affects the Sound by basically just saying, have you measured that, or can you provide measurements? Ban hammer. So yeah,
I'll have to go on there so I can get banned.
Yeah,
I'll talk about how the new floor mats in my Toyota Prius C dramatically improved the car's acceleration because everything matters.
Yeah. So I have to say though, this whole Apple Music thing it affects me personally, and it has affected me personally here recently.
How?
So I think I've said this recently. I have been shopping for a new integrated amplifier because my reference integrated amp is dying. And just one by one, the inputs are just dying, and I don't feel like figuring out how to fix it. So I decided on a new NAD because I sort of thought back about, like, of the products that I reviewed in the last few years, which ones are still living rent free in my head? And the NAD C3050 LE just haunts my dreams. And so they've got a new non-LE version. And so I'm buying that. And it supports Blue OS, which is for people who don't know, it's a streaming system comparable to Sonos. A little more audiophile oriented, but it doesn't do Apple Music. Sonos does Apple Music, Blue OS doesn't. And I am around that new integrated amp going to be sort of filling out the rest of my house with Blue OS speakers, just because I think the ecosystem is so great. Yeah. But it doesn't natively support Apple Music. And so the only way to get Apple Music to it is Bluetooth or AirPlay. And I was just like, that's kind of like, it does impede my ability to use it as in the course of reviews or what have you. But I thought about, does it really matter? I've got Qobuz. I can use that for reviews. That's supported natively by Blue OS. And when I'm just listening for enjoyment, I'm fine with, AirPlay transcoding. If for whatever reason I'm not using my desktop app or whatever, I'm fine. It sounds, you know what? My speakers are going to make a way, way, way bigger difference in the sound than that is. So it's just not a big deal. But if it is a big deal to you, I think John Darko does a really, really great job of explaining how to make it work if you're really desperate to make it work.
Yeah, and he shows this little FiO streamer, which I was unaware of. That's a little, I don't know, it's like a little box. It's really small. It's only, it looks like it's probably 6 or 7 inches high and about 3 or 4 inches wide and about 6 inches deep. And it's got an Android phone built into it. And so you can get all your services right there, like Apple Music, just like you would off of your phone, except it outputs bit perfect sound without you having to do anything. And I was looking at this thing going like, I never saw that thing, but that is really cool. See, that's why I use Bluetooth so much, because your phone works. You know, phones are mostly really easy to work. And so many things, when audio companies try to build their own streamers, they are often very clumsy, I think. And it's like, oh, this way I can work exactly like my phone, except then I get like a big system to hook up to, and I don't have to stream through Bluetooth or anything like that. And I can get really high audio quality, but easily, without any effort on my part. I'm kind of like, I got to dig more into this thing. Maybe there's some place where I could write about it. It also looks nice. It's like a very lifestyle friendly product.
Yeah. Very
So
cool.
like this would look good on your desk or in your living room or whatever. And it's got like an unbalanced and balanced headphone outputs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the THX AAA headphone amp design too. So it's a good headphone amp.
And what's really cool is when he touches it, it responds, which is just a novel concept for a high-end audio device with a touchscreen. Still in 2023, you're kind of expected to poke it and go, oh, I didn't do anything, and poke it again, and then it registers both pokes. No, this thing is really responsive looking, at least in his videos. So
because it's an Android phone.
Basically, yeah.
Slapped into this thing. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to move on to a different topic? But I really want to encourage people to go watch this video. It's just he just, if you're curious about these subjects, about if you're an Apple Music user, absolutely check it out. But even if you're just curious about all the differences, and because he talks a lot about Chromecast and things like that too, and so it's not just Apple like AirPlay he's talking about. It's like how to get Apple Music through all these different Wi-Fi streaming systems. And it's really, I think for anybody who's into home audio, this is a really good video to check out. I think it's only like 10 minutes or something.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Let's take a break, go get some water, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back. This is Audio
Unleashed
with your hosts, Dennis Berger
and Brent Butterworth.
That's me.
Who has previously been described.
Yes, as have you.
So what are we talking about this segment?
We are talking about, actually, I started this journey with a recent column by Stereophile editor-in-chief Jim Austin, welcoming back a writer named Martin Colloms, who I remember reading when I first started getting into audio, high-end audio at least. And, I was a rabid reader of Stereophile in the early 90s. I just thought it was awesome. And he was one of the writers, and he did really interesting reviews that were really technically in-depth. He's one of the founders of Monitor Audio, so he's got technical chops, and he wrote probably one of the best books on loudspeakers called High Performance Loudspeakers, which I have. And so I was like, because he's kind of UK centric. I mean, he doesn't, like, you hadn't even heard of him, and that was really surprising to me. But he writes for whatever UK magazines. And so anyway, Jim Austin cited this Martin Colloms column from January 1991, which I was like, I wonder what that was. And I clicked on it, and I remember reading it. Now, of course, I read it when I was I knew a lot about audio because I spent a lot of time in recording studios, and I built amps and things like that by then, and speakers and whatever, but I didn't know like high-end audio. I didn't know, there's a lot of things I didn't know. And, but it really struck me reading this column, how it made me wonder, how much things have changed. Because, when this was written in 1991, we didn't have a lot of the really good speaker research that we have to rely on. Was just still in the forming stages, and some of it was out there. Some of the mainly Canadian research, some of it was out there, but people were still kind of feeling around in the dark for how to make a speaker in so many cases. And towards the 97, 98 is when the Harman research really got published and codified, and people started to adopt that. And it relied so heavily on double-blind testing. And, the results were inarguable. You can sit there and say, oh, no, those speakers suck, but no one's presented, any scientific research that that debunks anything that was done in that research back then. And that research is now codified into the CTA 2034 speaker measurement standard, right? Which is used by all the people that do really good speaker measurements. Like our friend Aaron Hardison, and a few others. And if I ever get seriously back into speaker measurements, I'll start doing it. But I was reading this column, and it brought back some, I don't know how to describe it. It's like there's a lot, because it starts out great. It starts out really great. It starts out like, okay, I'll quote, "Any reviewer worth his salt is a crusader working in the best interests of the consumer. In a technical field such as high-quality audio, few consumers are fully qualified to judge absolute performance for themselves. If forced to rely on the advice of retail salespeople," well, those were the days, "that they may not be confident of the quality of the advice given. Equipment critics working for the audio press are therefore vested with a heavy responsibility to try to produce fair, consistent, accurate opinions for their readers' guidance. On the other hand, they also have a duty to be fair to the designers and manufacturers of the audio equipment they write about." So I'm like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, wow, I completely agree with everything he said there. But then he starts to get into the lab testing, and and he's got it's a little because he says, if the reviewer is prepared to spend the money, it is not difficult to set up a sophisticated test laboratory. It's like, dude, have you ever set up a test laboratory? It's brutal. Everyone who's ever done it has spent innumerable late nights, trying to figure out how to get the crap to work. Even now, 30 years later. But he does say that, like, you need some lab tests in there to sort of ferret out the sort of obvious problems, and just to make sure that the product is functional. And he talks about some of the different things that a manufacturer can do, like with a speaker, to make it potentially get a better review that could kind of fool the reviewer. And like putting a little bit of treble lift from 3 to 10 kilohertz, it says, can give rise to a mildly increased sense of immediacy, transparency, and liveliness without being necessarily directly obvious as treble lift. Yeah. Now, although I would say, well, that's legit. If you want your speaker to sound like that, that's fine. You're not trying to fool anybody. There are things that people do to try to, to make it really smiley, like have a lot of bass and a lot of treble, and review people still do that today with speakers, and reviewers still fall for it. So that's one of the reasons that I think measurements are so important. But then it starts to go,
right before that, he talks a little bit about something that I don't think many people talk about still to this day: the channel imbalances, and how that can affect your perceptual, your perception of your audio system, where he's talking about slight errors in channel balance, either in specific frequency ranges or an overall level, can subtly disturb one's opinion of the sharpness of stereo focus. Those aren't the words that I would have chosen, but certainly, we've discovered this measuring stuff at Soundstage, that, the stuff that's got a really, really great at Soundstage, the publication, we have found that gear that has really, really great Soundstage, the perceptual audio phenomenon, usually has really, really great channel balance. So that great channel balance matching goes along with good, image specificity and things like that. But it's stuff that's something that not a lot of people talk about even to this day. And he's talking about it in 1991. So, props to him for that.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing, because like if I hear a channel imbalance, I reflexively move my head to fix it, which is true if there's a channel imbalance that's on like a balance control or on an amplifier or something, right? Or just your distance from the speakers. Now, if there's a channel imbalance in terms of the two speakers matching, where the frequency responses don't match, then you can't fix that by moving your head.
Right.
So I don't notice channel imbalances a lot of times. And with headphones, you don't seem to notice them.
Yeah, one of the things we found at Soundstage, this is why Diego, when he's measuring the channel balance, does it at different volume levels, because he's noticed as you turn the volume knob up, the left and right channels can get slightly out of balance. So, yeah.
So I have some problems with some of the things he starts to say, which frankly are dated statements. But, hey, Stereophile linked to the article and I read it. So they're recommending the article. So I'm free to state. All right. So he's talking about measurements. And he's like, these measurements may indicate that a given design could not possibly be a bad performer. Yet conversely, no amount of good measurements results can guarantee that a loudspeaker is really any good. And that is just not true anymore. I mean, if you have a speaker that measures really well according to CTA 2034, it's going to be good. And anybody can walk into a room and say, oh, this loudspeaker sucks. But that person doesn't know what they're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not, and if you change the brand name on the loudspeaker, their opinion's going to change of it, right? If it says, I don't know, Wilson Audio on the front, then, some audiophile might walk in and go, oh, God, oh, this is great. Just yet another triumph for Wilson Audio. And if it says, Bose on the front, they're going to walk in and go, oh, this sucks. Yeah. And no matter what it sounds like. And so this is...
One time I was hanging out with Sandy Gross before a CES show. So this is the day before the show, and I'd gone up to check out what he was going to be showing. And we were listening to, he would always let me pick the music when it was just me and him hanging out. What do you want to hear? What do you want to hear? I got some Doors for you. I got some I Love It, So we're sitting there listening to the Doors, LA Woman, and a woman sticks in her head and she was like, you shouldn't be demoing your speakers with such low resolution sources. And she stormed out of the room, and he turned her and looked at me. And he was like, what are you going to do? It's 9624. I don't have higher resolution than that. So, but yeah, it just goes to show it's people like to make claims about their superiority, right? I can tell that what you're listening to is not good enough for me.
Right. Well, it's like it starts to devolve into that, though, because he says the history of high fidelity is littered with superbly engineered models which have measured well but never made it in the real world. How does the reviewer explain to a designer who only believes in graphs and meter readings that his brainchild does not sound involving or interesting? It's real simple. The reviewer can say, well, my subjective reaction is that it's not involving or interesting.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? As I said before, any idiot can walk into a room and say, this is not involving or interesting, right? It doesn't mean anything at all. It means something only to the reviewer, except these magazines back then, and still to some extent, still to a large extent today, think that just because some guy, a reviewer or whoever, listens to something and says, this is not involving or interesting. But wait. I'm not sure that a speaker needs to be interesting. I mean, like Zoo Audio, okay? Their speakers sound interesting. They are a long way from flat. But I mean, nothing against them. Hey, they look cool. They're cool guys. They do great demos. And if you like that sound, if that's going to get you listening to more music, then whatever. But, to say that, but it's an interesting sounding speaker. And if you come in and say that like a really, by the book speaker that performs perfectly, it measures perfectly is not interesting. It's like, well, the music then is not interesting, or maybe you're just not interested in music or whatever. It's like speakers aren't supposed to be interesting. It's like they're supposed to play the music for you. But it starts to kind of devolve there, and it gets more into there's a lot of old sort of shibboleths that are resurrected here that I think I believed him at the time because it was coming from authority figures, right? But now I know better. And he said, like regular experience of live music making is exceedingly valuable in order to refresh one's oral memory for natural sound. The latter must form the true foundation of all subjective assessment. That was dated even then. I mean, most of the music people listen to nowadays has no natural element to it, or limited natural element to it. I mean, there's, whatever rock band you like, well, those drums, that drum sound was replaced with samples.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, and the guitars and everything are so processed as you and I do for our growing fan base of Butterburger, the Butterburger house band. When we do that, we, like everybody else who does music these days, outside of people that record, stereo performances, classical performances in stereo,
Mhm.
or a folk singer or something like that in stereo. The very small number of audiophile labels and audiophile releases, it doesn't work like that. It's like, yeah, go to a live music thing. And, I always tell people, hey, you know what? Go into Guitar Center and grab a drumstick and tap on some cymbals, and then go home and listen to your audio system and see if cymbals sound. Then cymbals are a big thing. It's like, boy, if you understand how cymbals sound, that's a big help. But anyway, yeah. I'm like, come on, that's just such an old, dated statement. And maybe it was true back in the 70s or something, when music was a lot more live then, and you didn't, and the production was a lot more organic, and but this is just, it's like we're listening to recorded music here. It's its own art form. It does not need to be referenced to live music. Live music, the whole thing that Harry Pearson thought up, where live music is the absolute sound. Well, sorry, pal, not now.
Yeah.
But it gets into talking about how he makes a lot of cases for what they call the single presentation method. And that's where you have a reference system that you're used to, and you change out, if you want to evaluate an amplifier, well, you change out the amplifiers and you listen for the sound differences. Okay.
Yeah.
You do this cited, so what the amplifier is. So your bias, so your expectations are, if you have a lowly Parasound $1,000 amplifier in the system, and you go stick a Solution amplifier that's $40,000, it doesn't matter what it sounds like. You're gonna think the Solution's better, unless you just hate high-end audio, and you're gonna say the Parasound's clearly better. When the fact of the matter is, in a blind test, you couldn't tell them apart.
Yeah.
And in a blind ABX test, you can't tell them apart. In a blind AB test, who knows which one you like? You might hear or think you hear some very modest differences, but whether or not you'll deliver. And I've done more blind amp tests than probably anybody. And, so often when we did that, and we do, blind A, B, C, D, right? We wouldn't do ABX. We'd do like, here's 4 amps, just compare them and match the levels. And, sometime, once in a while, an amp won, but a lot of times it'd be kind of like, yeah, they're pretty close, but I kind of slightly prefer amplifier B. Which one is that? And then somebody else would prefer amplifier A. And, this is why, this is 30 years later, we still don't have any data on what people prefer in an amplifier.
Yeah.
We have nothing. We have nothing to go by. And so, if amps made that, whereas with speakers and headphones, we have tons of great research out there. And,
right.
If amps made that big of a difference, if amps were that critical to the sound, we'd have some research that says, here are the clear consumer preferences. Then he gets into like, do CD players sound the same? And which, that's also, we're kind of out of date on that too, except CD players are kind of coming back.
He also gets into cables in an interesting way. I would like to ask him if his thoughts on this have evolved since 1991. He's talking about...
Well, I've never met the guy. I'm sad that I haven't met him. I'm surprised that I haven't met him, but I think he's just a lot more UK-centric, and I don't go to Europe all that much. So, but he says, like, with CD players, CD promises perfect sound forever, yet my experience of a very large sample of 300 models with approximately 30% of repeat auditions, whatever that means, has been that such CD players do not sound the same. It's like, well, what were your testing methods?
Yeah.
Did you ABX them? No, of course you didn't, because then you couldn't have told the difference. Did you even blind test them? Did you match the levels? What did you do? I mean, it's, and then he talks about amplifiers, and, he's talking about how, amplifiers, I really had a problem with this. He's talking about how, when he started working, reviewing amplifiers, he'd had a scale of 0 to 10, but he had to keep raising, expanding the scale up to 24 because amplifiers got so much better. But we don't have any evidence that amplifiers sound any better. In fact, our friend Jeff Fritz, former Soundstage, editor-in-chief?
Yeah.
Yeah. And absolutely fabulous human being, and now like the brand ambassador for Magico. I remember he went and bought a Krell KSA 50, which I think was the first Krell, and went and bought one, because he found one online for a reasonable price and bought it, and he was comparing it to whatever high-end amp he had. He's like, man, this thing completely holds up.
Yeah.
And every time I've ever seen somebody do that with a good amp, a good old amp and a good new one, it's like I did it, for our friend Gordon Soak, who runs Innovative Audio up in Vancouver, BC. We did a blind test of receivers, and we had, like a high-end Pioneer from way back in the day and some other newer stuff. And the high-end Pioneer sounded great. It actually won the test because, gee whiz, it had a big-ass Toroidal transformer in it. It had big storage capacitors, okay? It was built like a high-end amp. It had tons of power. And, and we had it kind of cranked, and some of the other receivers couldn't quite get the dynamics out of the speakers. And that's an old amp. So it's like amps give me evidence that amps have, the sound of amps has improved. Hasn't. I don't know of any evidence that suggests that. But the whole cables things, and he talks about, and this also bothered me a lot because, he basically talks about how, scientific tests say that, I'm not quoting him here. I'm paraphrasing. Scientific tests say that, we can't hear a difference in cables. And he's got a thing that's a bullet for metallurgy. And, he talks about how many audio engineers consider that Ohm's law is wholly sufficient to describe current flow in a wire, and that all metallic conductors must sound the same owing to the fundamental property of free electron mobility in this class of material. However, there is now strong evidence to indicate that the choice of element or ally for a conductor, its metallurgical history, and the absolute purity all affect the sound quality. Where is this evidence? And I was looking at the end, he has a lot of footnotes where he cites articles. They're all his own articles.
That's convenient.
I can cite absolute proof of everything I say because here's a link to an article by Brent Butterworth that says I'm right. But I actually went and did, I'm an AES member, so I get on their e-library all the time. And I went and did a search for all this stuff, as I have done several times, to see, like, are there any articles that actually, have studied this? And you find that there are. And it is pretty, there are some cases where you can hear like a difference between capacitors or something, but it's pretty limited. And if you look at, the vast majority of the literature on there, basically says, no, this stuff doesn't make any difference. But he says this finding, unwelcome for those working in this field, cannot be ignored. It's like, well, yeah, it can be ignored. If some guy walks into a room and says, oh, this cable clearly sounds better than the other one because it has carefully aligned something or another, crystals of blah, blah, something, or whatever marketing BS the manufacturer came up with. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, he attaches a huge amount of meaning, and this was common back then. So this was the whole spiel behind stereophile back then. And it still is to some extent today. It's like, well, if some guy says something sounds a certain way, that is what we take as true. And we have to dismiss any scientific evidence that contradicts it. Now, stereophile's a lot better than that because, there's so often that the reviewers will say, oh my God, this speaker sounds amazing. And John Atkinson measures it and basically says, this is a piece of crap. He doesn't say that.
Yeah.
It's like there needs to be a John Atkinson to Brent Butterworth translator. I'll do that. I'll serve that. But it's like, oh my God, he just talks about all this cable crap, but it just really, it bothers me that there was so much of this back then where it's like, what, if control testing tells us this doesn't make a difference, but some guy thinks it makes a difference, then it makes a difference. Well, wrong. And then on top of that, okay, it makes a difference. As you have pointed out so many times in our conversations. Okay, it makes a difference. So what? How important is that to music reproduction?
Yeah.
And, according to my theorem, which is, above a certain level, which is fairly low, music is this music is independent of reproduction.
Yeah.
It's
my theorem on the whole thing.
No, what is it?
My distraction-based theory of audio reproduction.
Yeah. Say it again.
For me, it boils down to distractions. If there is something that is consistently taking your attention away from the music, causing you to be out of the moment, right? Well, that's a problem to be fixed. Constantly people are emailing me going, hey, I have this amplifier. Should I buy this amplifier instead? And I'm like, well, what is wrong with the app that you have?
Yeah.
Like, what are you hearing that is bothering you? What is keeping you from really, truly focusing on your music? If the answer is nothing, then what is this obsession with the upgrade path?
Yeah.
So,
which might change the sound a little bit, but I mean, if you have some crap speakers, then you are definitely going to benefit from an upgrade. If you're using a LePi LP 2020 amp, which puts out 10 watts on a good day, and and you're driving some big tower speakers with it, and you upgrade to a Parasound or something, well, yeah, it'll sound a lot better, right?
Yeah,
but
I think if you're obsessing over the conducting material into competent speaker cables, you're creating your own distractions.
You're missing the point of music entirely. You're not worrying about music. It's like, I've joked about how these high-end audio magazines are it's almost like having a magazine called Wine Glass Monthly, where you just talk about different wine glasses. Yeah. And then you have a little short section in the back where they actually review a few wines. And they say, oh, it's all about the wine, but they just obsess on the glasses. And yes, glasses do make a difference, but not that big a one, right? Yeah. Reasonably good wine glass is fine. Anyway, so I want to move on, but I think that I don't like to see this article linked to as a supposed, wise thing that was said decades ago. There's things in here I agree with, but a lot of this really has gone. Some of it has gone away, and a lot of audio enthusiasts are just like, that stuff is stupid. But some of it still exists, and especially in some of these high-end audio mags where honestly, their goal is to sell high-end audio gear. Yeah, that keeps them in business. I just hate to see this kind of. And it's anti-science. It's not rational thinking. It's pseudo-scientific. They're just kind of trying to put scientific sounding labels like single presentation method onto a completely casual testing that tends to give you the results that you want.
I'll say this. My opinions have changed a lot over the decades. Hopefully Martin has, reevaluated some of these positions. I'd like to see him go back to this article again and just go through it and go, you know what? No, I stand by that. I've changed my mind on that. Here's why. I think, hey, Stereophile, that'd be an interesting article to run.
That would be a really good article, Stereophile.
Yeah.
Do that. Come on, let it run. You publish all that stuff with Atkinson, just completely trashing bad speakers and bad amps. Yeah. You could run this.
Yeah.
Not that they're listening to the Audio
Unleashed
podcast.
They might be. You don't know.
They
should. Everybody should.
Everybody should. So let's move on to another topic.
All right. Let's go get some water, powder our noses, and we'll be right back.
All right.
Welcome back. This is
Audio
Unleashed. I'm Dennis.
I'm Brent.
And this segment, we are going to be talking about a problem that is plaguing the world, man. This is one of the most important topics we have ever discussed. Why audiophiles have problems with Beats headphones.
Why?
Yeah.
Where'd you find out about this? Where'd this come from?
This is on Slash Gear.
Okay, which is a website that does something or another.
Yeah, they do lots of different stuff. They do tech, they do cars, they do science stuff. I actually kind of read them. They're pretty good pop science coverage, and I say that as someone who thinks that most pop science coverage is garbage.
Yeah,
Theirs is pretty good. That's actually why I.
Well, wow. So they're kind of like, is it like Verge or like that? Or
yeah.
I mean, CNET's kind of like this now too. They do a lot of pop culture coverage and all kind of stuff. And
I guess
I hate pop culture, so I hate everything. But whatever.
Anyway, I saw this article when I was reading something completely unrelated. It's by David Bixenspan. And when I saw the headline, I was like, I just want to hear Brent rant about this for 15 minutes.
Okay. About Beats.
Yeah. Why audiophiles have problems with Beats headphones. So he starts off with sort of, the expected boilerplate. Apple is dominant in the headphone space. Apple branded headphones account for 34.4% of the market, while Beats accounts for another 15.3%. Beats is an Apple brand. And goes on from there to talk about how people who were into audio hate Beats, which is interesting because a lot of people really, really seem to love them. He talks about the history a bit. He talks about the sound of the original headphones with their, not so great, kind of muddy mid bass, whatever. But did you have a chance to read the whole article?
I did read the whole article and I loved it. And it was funny. And, it talks a lot about what are audiophiles and stuff. And it's kind of right on. And, but it's fair. It's not like, audiophiles are stupid. He basically says, well, audiophiles are people that are really into this, but some of the things they do and say make people think they're kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And he gives some examples, but then he kind of goes into Beats. And he talks about how, Jimmy Iovine, the co-founder of Beats, along with Dr. Dre, says, the audiophiles never really gave them a chance. I don't know that that's the case.
I mean, you gave them a chance from the giddy up.
I did. I was I guess we were at the launch together. And, I just remember walking out of that launch and some, veteran press person says to me, kids aren't going to pay $300 for headphones. And, that was proven wrong. Yeah. And, but those early ones sounded, and this is back in the early days of the headphone boom. So this is, what was it? 2008, 2009,
something like
2007
was,
I can't remember. Somewhere in there. And
let's Google it.
Why don't you Google it while I'm blabbering?
Okay.
But the first ones came out and they were super bassy. But then there was the overall, I did some consulting for one company, a few companies, but one company in particular that was thinking about getting into the headphone business and decided not to. And they wanted to run some headphones by me. I met with them and I met with their ODM, the company that was building the headphones for them. And they were talking about voicing. And boy, these things were really bassy. And I said, these are really bassy. And the ODM says, look, that's what sells now. And there were a lot of so-called, the whole Beats thing evolved into this sort of hip-hop headphone thing, headphone voicing. They had like colossal amounts of bass, and they kind of try to balance it out with like a peak around like 1 or 1.5 kilohertz, and then another peak at like 4 kilohertz or 5 kilohertz or something like that, right? Which normally you have like a bass bump and then you have a peak at about 3 kilohertz with a good sounding headphone. Yeah. And so these things all sounded weird. And I think Beats was the originator of that voice. I don't think I have any measurements on hand for the original Beats headphones, but I remember they came out not long after that, they came out with like the Beats, like the smaller version of, like the on-ear version of the original ones. And they had a a Justin Bieber version called Just Beats. And
Oh God, I remember that.
they were purple. Wow. They were a nice shade of purple. And oh my God, they were so bassy. They were unbelievably bassy. And I mean, just one of the most unlistenable headphones I've ever heard. And then a friend of ours, who I won't name, said, "Do you have any Beats headphones laying around?" I'm kind of like, "Yeah, but these are like really bad, even for Beats." And she's like, "I don't care. Does it have the Beats logo?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "I want them." Okay. And
wow.
But that's the way it was. But yeah, so although the funny thing is, Jimmy Iovine talks about how, they want to recreate the studio experience. And I'm not sure that like just cranking the bass way up does that. But the funny thing is, though, Beats was only like that for about 2 years, maybe 3.
I found that on Wikipedia, they were founded in 2006.
Okay. Yeah. I couldn't remember quite the stage I was in, but Monster at the time was putting out really good, I can't remember if their headphones were any good, but their earphones were great. And I remember David Chesky of Chesky Records was like, "Oh man, you got to check these out. These are really good." And that guy's got good ears. They had a Miles Davis model that was pretty expensive, and oh my God, they were great. They had like a little trumpet little thing molded into them, but it was like a single dynamic, but it was a really high quality single dynamic, really good headphones or earphones. So Monster knew what they were doing. But I've been told by 2 people that worked at Monster at the time that, there's debate about whether Monster voiced them or whether Dr. Dre voiced them. And both of these people independently told me, "Oh no, the ODM voiced him." And, who knows? No one's going to agree on that, but but it ended up being a super bassy voicing, and a lot of people copied that for a long time. And it's rare though now to find headphones that sound like that. There's still a few, but it's really uncommon. And, I remember I was on the phone with the distributor for the headphone measurement gear that I have, who is down in LA. And we were just chatting about headphones. And I mentioned Beats, and I said, but I heard they hired some audio engineers there though, finally. And the guy said, "Well, they just bought a whole bunch of test gear from me."
Ooh.
And then I went to, I think it was a Audio Precision, who makes, audio test gear. I went to an Audio Precision thing, some kind of an event talking about their new whatever. And all the engineers and stuff go to that, and very, very few press, if any. And so like all the Harman guys would be there, all the engineering people from LA would be at these things. And I met the headphone engineers from Beats, and I was like, boy, these guys really know their stuff. These guys are really going to do some good product. And boy, it took 6 months, and all of a sudden Beats was making headphones that were not bassy, that had a subjectively flat response. And they still do. I mean, the Beats, I have the Beats, you have them too. I think it's the Beats Fit Pro. Is that what it's called?
I have the Beats Fit Pro. I got them instead of the Apple AirPods because they still do all of the Apple stuff, right? But I think they're more comfortable than the AirPods. I like the way they stick in my ear, So they sound great.
I think they sound fine. I think they sound kind of like all the other Apple products. They don't have a colossal amount of high end, but they're fine. They sound pretty neutral overall. They're not crazy sounding. I don't like them because they don't play all that terribly well with Android. But mine will. God, the noise canceling like cuts off at random sometimes, and a lot of times the true wireless connection loses phase, so the 2 earphones go out of phase with each other.
Ooh.
And so instead of getting a sort of in the middle of your head image, you get this spacey. And it'll just happen like in the middle of things, and then it'll go back.
Yeah,
and
I've never had that problem with iPhone.
Yeah.
And also, it's not
the only ones I've had that with, though.
Yeah. The thing is, Apple being Apple, they restrict their spatial audio stuff to their own products. So it's like if you want to do spatial audio on iPhone, you either have Apple headphones or Beats headphones. I like that aspect of them. I think they sound really good with the Atmos stuff on Apple Music. So I really, really enjoy them. They're one of the few in-ear products, wireless products that I've really, really liked. So
this guy didn't really actually say all that much about Beats in this article. It just gave us an excuse to talk about Beats.
yeah.
But they're fine. I mean, but since it's Apple now, I'm less inclined to. I mean, I have the ones that I have because Wirecutter wanted somebody to have more long-term experience with them. So I bumped a pair off Beats. And, because because no one had tested them with Android at Wirecutter, and they knew I used Android. So I Android them, and they're fine. I use them all the time. I mean, I wouldn't buy them. I mean, we found a pair of edifiers for like $50 that were actually better and more comfortable for me. And, God, you can find, we were looking at, is it Moondrop? Yeah, Moondrop has some new ones that are in this really cool kind of like lucite looking case. And it doesn't even have a top. I guess they're like magnetically held into the case. And they're noise canceling, and they're like, I don't know, $30. And I was like, I got to know how good those are. Because first of all, the noise canceling is probably terrible. Oh, but they talk about how, am I digressing too much?
No,
or can I do this?
Keep digressing if you want to, man.
They talk about how they've come up with a new version of feedback noise canceling that, most people use feedback and feed forward if you want to get this crazy level of noise canceling that people like Bose and Sony and Soundcore are able to achieve. Where you have a feedback microphone inside the headphones and you have a feed forward microphone outside the headphones. So it basically cancels the noise coming in, and then any noise that's left that actually makes it into the headphones is then canceled through another round of canceling.
Yeah.
To put it very simply, but they're saying, we have a new version of feedback only noise canceling that's better. And I'm just kind of like, no, it's not. You cost $29. How good could you be? But hey, you never know, man, because it used to be like nobody had good noise canceling but Bose. And now Soundcore has Bose level noise canceling more or less for a third of the price.
Yeah.
So, but
I'll say these Beats, the one thing that I will say that I don't think anybody could argue against is this is the only pair of in-ears that I've ever had that I could feel comfortable talking to you on the phone with. Because when I get on the phone, I'm I suddenly become hyperactive. I pace a lot, and I drink a lot of water. And I know in the past, every headphone I've had, from like the Sonys to the Apples that I had, everything like that, when I was talking to you on the phone, you would get like incensed by every bit of background noise, right? Like if I'm refilling the ice in my water or everything, you're like, good God, what's going on? And I'm like, sorry, man, I need ice. With these Beats, you never know when I get ice anymore. Right? You never know when I'm making noise in the background because they do such a good job of just isolating my voice that I'm a diehard Beats fan just because of that. I've never experienced another pair of earphones that does as good a job of making sure you're not subjective to the noise in my house. So I'll say that.
Well, okay. So our ringing endorsement for Beats.
They don't aggravate you when I'm on the phone with you.
Yeah, and they sound okay. They're fine.
I think they sound great. I think they're one of the better in-ears that I've auditioned. Although I wonder if they sound different with iPhone versus Android. Have you tried that?
Are they still cool though? Is it still like considered cool to have Beats?
When have I ever known what was considered cool? I'm sorry, I am uncool. What's the line from Almost Famous? The only true currency in this bankrupt world is what you share with someone else when you're uncool.
I guess so. I don't know who said that.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. Who was, oh my God, I cannot believe that I'm blanking on his name.
Lester Bangs?
Lester Bangs. Yeah, that was Lester Bangs' quote. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Okay, cool. I love that quote then. Hey, let's wrap this thing up.
Cool. Well, we should tell people before we head out the door that this has been a Butterburger production.
It has been.
I am. I drew the short straw, and I'm doing the mixing and mastering and editing this episode. So I'm sure you're happy to hear that.
We're gonna have some music. What music are you gonna use?
First track is, are we going to tell people that we recycled a percussion track? Fine.
Yeah.
We're recycling a percussion track.
Sure.
We worked on a new piece of music together. And then I think for the second piece, I'm gonna dig back through the Brent Butterworth library and just pick out something that works well with the episode. So yeah, one song will be by us and one song will be by you.
Okay. The one that has fake muted trumpet is the one by us.
Groovy. What else, man?
That's all. I think we're done. Except, we have a Patreon segment coming up for our Patreon people.
Patrons, stick around. Everybody else, thanks for joining us. Share this with your therapist. Let them know that it's changed your life, and leave us a comment on YouTube or something. I don't know, man. Do the stuff.
And tell those people that it changed your life also. Tell everybody it changed your life. For the good. For the good.
Yeah.
For better. So people will,
I don't know. That might be arguable.
Listen to it.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us, or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah. And so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.